Hey you, it is me, Josh Bloom, staring out the window at the P that I stare out of most frequently. I have just been offered another book deal, so now I will be staring out of this window quite a lot over the next year. More details to come. I sort of fell into this one. I replied to a journalist and author who was scouting writers for a UK imprint, and now I am a scouted writer for a UK imprint. This one will once again be about music, but a much bigger band than my previous book. That's all I will say now because I haven't signed the contract yet. If I never bring this up again, just assume that I ruined the relationship. Speaking of ruined relationships, I have reached a point in my creative life, and therefore my life, where I am having to confront ghosts of my past in order to create new ghosts in the future. I suppose we all have secrets, or at least secrets we keep from ourselves, and now the time has arrived for me to relate mine to my therapist. After 8 years of sessions, I have run out of runway. Tomorrow, I will access the abilities of another person who is qualified and authorized to hold my truths in hand as I sort through and integrate them into my personality. I realize that some of this speak is therapy speak, but who cares? It's content for the show. That's me making a joke because that's what I do when the discourse gets difficult. Speaking of the show, this is the latest edition of the 1461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast, the weekly compilation of my daily 1461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration posts that originate on TikTok and are then reposted on YouTube, Instagram, and Substack. I must confess that I have not been posting as frequently because not only is a daily post of this nature an incredibly trying task, but I also have become influenced by my own rhetoric. I have literally been ignoring the Trump administration because the dude is a giant douche. How can one really pay too much attention? That said, I am here, and I am still soldiering on for the same reasons as always: mindfulness, optimism, and hope for better days ahead, and for the solidarity I feel with anyone who is suffering because of the current state of the country and how it affects our personal daily lives. A small update pertaining to the previous episode. I talked about how Bruce Springsteen performed Purple Rain by Prince at the launch of Bruce's current tour, which is more focused on politics than usual, even though Bruce has always been focused on politics. My brother reminded me later that when we had last seen Bruce perform together in Brooklyn on April 23, 2016, it was 2 days after Prince died, and Bruce opened with Purple Rain at that show. I sort of can't believe that I did not remember this, but I am glad that my brother did. He is a keeper of some of my memories. Maybe I will have more room for more of my own after my therapy session tomorrow. In the meantime, please think of my precarious plan to confess as you read or listen to my latest extended essay over at Substack or on your preferred podcast platform. My 6,500-word piece about Paul McCartney, entitled "I Am Sick of Writing About Paul McCartney," is available to read now at superjews.substack.com. That's superjews.substack.com. Or you can listen by searching for Josh Bloom in the app you are using right now. You will find the experience much more immersive now that you know I am deep into psychotherapy. And now, speaking of deep into psychotherapy, let's get into 1461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration. Days 376 through 382. This week on the show, On day 376, I talk about the bizarre attacks on the Pope by the leader and the vice leader of the Trump administration following the Pope's criticism of the war in Iran. I point out the irony of the vice leader attacking the Pope while simultaneously promoting a book about converting to Catholicism. I also describe how this non-stop chaos is becoming a white noise singularity where the outrage all blends together into one overwhelming tone. Personally, I like a woke pope. On day 377, I talk about a longtime friend of mine who works as a prison librarian in one of the most notorious prisons in America. I reflect on his belief that while the prison system itself may not rehabilitate people, individual human beings like him still can. I also explore ideas about punishment, humanity, and the value of trying to bring positivity into even the darkest environments. I am proud of my friend, the prison librarian. I remind you that you are listening to a shameless self-promoter on day 378, and I am not just talking about the leader of the Trump administration, I am talking about me! I use this comparison to introduce my new 6,500-word essay about Paul McCartney, available on Substack for you to read, or on your preferred podcast app for me to read to you. This is a great way to go about ignoring the Trump administration. Don't you know that? Links are in the show notes. On day 379, Penn, Al, and Mitt walk into a non-alcoholic bar. On this day, I talk about Penn Jillette discussing his positive interactions with former Senators Al Franken and Mitt Romney despite their political differences. I reflect on the idea that beneath ideological disagreements, most people still share common values and a desire for human connection, and while we all have a chance to change at every corner in life, some people choose not to. I think you know who I mean. On day 380, I remind us all that just a few days ago, a psychotic nutjob disturbed the leader of the Trump administration's dinner, and how somehow this situation reminded me of how Paul Reubens, aka Pee Wee Herman, played a waiter in the fancy restaurant Chez Paul in the film The Blues Brothers. Frankly, almost everything reminds me of this scene, but this did too. I don't think this crime was staged, but I do think Donald took advantage of it anyway. On day 381, I remind us all again that the human being who received the third most votes for president in U.S. history is Kamala Harris. I bring this up again as the Supreme Court decides that apparently black people do not need to benefit from the Voting Rights Act anymore. Thanks, bigots. On a positive note, I suggest that the country may now be entering a new phase of accountability and change, and as a gay Jew, I certainly hope that's true. On day 382, I end the week by pointing out that over the 10 years or so of the Trump administration, I have only actually seen 3 of those stupid hats and about 6 of those gross-ass bumper stickers. In other words, we're okay. My real-life experiences in a diverse community continue to show that people mostly get along with one another. No one around me is as scary and obsessed as Richard Dreyfuss playing with mashed potatoes in Close Encounters. By the way, if you are a regular listener, then you know I often mention the local McDonald's that I visit on many mornings for a 2-for-1 Egg McMuffin with no butter pat. Well, guess what? I won't be doing that anymore, and it's not because of what I am about to tell you specifically, but more just the overall vibe. This will be clear when I explain how I left the situation. I often see the same woman at the cash register. She often complains about the job and comes off slightly not wound too tight when she does it. That's fine. I sympathize momentarily because I am just paying and leaving, so why not? But the other day, she said something about her F-slur for gay people boss not giving her the day off. I wasn't sure she said what I thought she said, and so I asked her to repeat herself. She did. I asked, "What if I am an F-slur for gay people?" And used the actual word, of course, as she did. She said, "Oh, I don't think you are." And I replied, "Yes, I am." She didn't seem thrown off and started to explain that she lived in the city for a long time and was around gay people all the time and likes gay people. I actually believed her. I said that she seemed to be saying it hatefully in regard to her boss more than saying it hatefully in regard to gay people, and her boss does seem sort of annoying from my experience. Like I explained, she always seemed a bit off to begin with, but I have seen her there many times and we were cool. So I asked, "Are we cool?" She said we were, and I didn't think too much more about it until I thought about going in there again and decided that it was a sign of a good time to switch it up. It also smelled like pee one day, and they were also popping balloons that sounded like gunshots. Gay slurs, pee smells, and gunfire represent the trio that will always cause me to depart. Speaking of depart, enjoy the show. I will see you on the other side.
Day 376 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. There is a hilarious aspect to the ongoing attacks on, of all people, the Pope. Yes, the Pope, by the leader of the Trump administration and specifically the vice leader of the Trump administration. If you are unfamiliar, this started with Pope Leo saying, in reference to what I see as a war of choice in Iran, that God does not bless any conflict. Pope Leo called it truly unacceptable and said to stop the spiral of violence. The leader of the Trump administration responded by saying ridiculously that Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. I don't want a pope who thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. The hilarious part to me starts with J.D. Vance warning that the Pope should be careful. The reason this is hilarious is because the vice leader of the Trump administration just announced that he is coming out with a book about his conversion to Catholicism. So, unless this is some kind of crazy publicity stunt where J.D. Vance thinks that attacking the Pope will create awareness and sales of his book about converting to Catholicism, it seems as if he has made a big mistake. I think J.D. is going to have to go back to do a rewrite and just call the book Nevermind or something like that. What we are seeing with these latest attacks, when coupled with all of the other chaos that is going right now in this administration, is the emergence of a white noise singularity. It is when the noise becomes so intense and overwhelming that it just becomes a single tone. It isn't composed of discernible elements anymore. Quite frankly, I think that's great, because it is in line with the message that I have been putting out here for 376 days. I believe this administration will take us to the bottom, and the exposure of the rot that we have been living in so plainly will allow us deeper awareness of how to conduct ourselves in the future as we elect new leaders. God bless Pope Leo, who should not worry about any damage to his reputation. I don't know what he will do next, but I will continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 377 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I have a friend who works in the prison system. He works in one of the most notorious prisons in America, so notorious that if I mentioned the inmate he mentioned to me, you would know where he works. He is employed as a librarian, and yes, he has seen The Shawshank Redemption starring Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins. My friend does not believe in the system's ability to rehabilitate prisoners, but he does believe in his ability to contribute to rehabilitating prisoners. We spent about 90 minutes on the phone catching up yesterday. I've known this guy for decades, and based on what I know about him, I am not surprised at all that he chooses to work as a librarian, and I am not surprised that he chooses to work in a prison. In fact, this is not the first time he has worked in a prison. To get to where he is right now, he has had to work his way up. This is one reason why I am proud of him, but it is his belief in his role in rehabilitating prisoners that most impresses me. He is interested in gaining their trust by showing respect for their humanity in a system that does not. The irony of this is not lost on me. I completely understand the inclination, which I had to check in myself, to think of prisoners who have committed crimes, and in the cases my friend described to me, heinous crimes, as subhuman or even inhuman. The fact of the matter is they have been sentenced, they are serving, and there is no other course of action but to either let them rot and eat up taxpayer money or try to alleviate some of the negative energy in the world while eating up taxpayer money. I know why my friend does not believe in the system, because the system, including the specific system that he experiences every day of his life at work, is okay with letting prisoners rot. I acknowledge my own feelings of they did the crime, they should do the time, and that time should consist of grease and grime. But in keeping with the ideas behind this series of mindfulness, optimism, and hope, I know that there is value to all of humanity in trying to bring positivity to these people's lives. I am proud of my friend for being willing to expose himself to danger and to use the bonds he creates by his presence to remind inmates that there is optimism through education, which I hope will include a lesson on ignoring the Trump administration. Day 378 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. There is something that I have in common with the leader of the Trump administration. I have mentioned in the past that every so often I discover that there is something I have in common with this man. Today, I am willing to admit that that commonality is in the realm of self-promotion. Because today I have published the most extensive essay I have written since my book about psych-pop icons and co-founders of the Elephant Six Collective, The Apples in Stereo, was published in December of 2025. This brand new extensive essay is about another rock icon, Paul McCartney. This is a 6,500 word piece that is available now on my Substack. And as you might imagine, if someone is going to sit down and write 6,500 words, it is not going to be just a review of Paul McCartney's new documentary, Man on the Run, or his new single, Days We Left Behind. It is going to be an insightful and inward-looking way for me to tell my personal story in relation to Paul's personal story. Now, this is where the leader of the Trump administration and I diverge, unfortunately, because when it comes to the leader of the Trump administration, I do not see much exploration of inner life, because if there were, I think he would see someone he didn't want to see. I believe when a person behaves the way that the leader of the Trump administration does, then such a person gets that way by what I believe is never bothering to better himself. But that is just an opinion based on what I have witnessed throughout the public life of the leader of the Trump administration. As a New Yorker, I speak frankly because I have seen Donald for decades, and that frank talk is in this Paul McCartney piece that I once again, like the leader of the Trump administration, am shamelessly self-promoting. So I ask you to take a little walk over to my Substack to subscribe and read this piece today. And by the way, when I say to take a walk, I mean with your computer or smartphone, not your actual legs. Let's be real. That's not how the internet works. Thank you for letting me share this information. Please continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 379 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. A former libertarian who knows the leader of the Trump administration personally and mocks him. A former Democrat senator who was forced out of the Senate because of a comedic photograph that went too far. And a former Republican senator walk into a non-alcoholic bar because two of these men, and possibly all of them, don't drink. The former libertarian I'm talking about is Penn Jillette of the magic duo Penn and Teller, who as a runner-up on The Celebrity Apprentice was robbed of his win because he said the leader of the Trump administration's hair looks like cotton candy made from piss. Penn was discussing how he, Al Franken, and Mitt Romney, who previously agreed that they could not agree politically, now could, because at their core, beneath their ideological, political, and philosophical differences, are values and beliefs that all people hold. Essentially, we all want to be good to one another and connect with one another and find a deeper humanity within one another. That is what I love about most people, and that is why it is disheartening to receive negative comments full of anger from the supporters of the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. I realize this is a limited set of people led by one person who I personally feel is one of the most despicable human beings that we have ever known in human history. Certainly what I consider one of the most despicable people I've ever known in my human history. That is why Penn finds agreement with people he used to disagree with at some point. Not over the shared finding of the leader of the Trump administration and the people he gathers around him as despicable, but in the shared belief that we cannot allow ourselves to be dragged away from our common values and our wish for the prosperity of everyone we love and everyone we may love in the future. Everyone has the option to grow and evolve and change, and to me, that is what is most exciting and exhilarating and purposeful about life. It is the ability to become something more than I thought I could be the day before. Not everyone seems to take advantage of this option, and I am sad for anyone that does not want to experience this sensation. For the rest of us, we will continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 380 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. How was your dinner on Saturday? The dinner attended by the leader of the Trump administration, and Mrs. Leader of the Trump administration was disrupted by someone whom they did not invite to dinner. I am so sorry they did not get to experience the fine service of a waiter like the one Paul Rubens, aka Pee Wee Herman, played in The Blues Brothers, who so memorably waited on Jake and Elwood Blues at Shape Hall. Now, I am not one of these people who believes an event like this is staged, and in fact, I don't believe the previous event in Pennsylvania that yielded the famous photograph was staged either. What I believe is that this particular person seems to attract a lot of negative attention from people prone to violence who aren't living in reality, which, in my opinion, is what they have in common with the leader of the Trump administration. Why does he attract this kind of attention? Maybe it's because of what I see as a lifetime of mistreating people. But anyway, I don't buy into staging because I don't think it is necessary. It is my belief that the well-worked, honed, and perfected ability of the leader of the Trump administration to take any event and use it to his advantage is a skill that doesn't require staging. As I have said, it is my personal belief he is a con man, and maybe the best con man that we have known in history. As such, he is going to use these events to manipulate the perception of the people in order to continue to con. It's catchy, right? You know what else is catchy? A little bit of good news, because today Day 380 represents 26% completion of the 1,461 days. I am proud of you. I am proud of me. I am even proud of the leader of the Trump administration for surviving these violent attacks. There is no place for violence, but there is always a place to call out despicable and unacceptable behavior. I believe attacks on the leader of the Trump administration's character are absolutely acceptable. Look, if I went to a fancy dinner, I would not want it being disrupted either, but apparently that is part of being the leader. Personally, I would request a doggy bag before the evacuation and eat my meal at home while ignoring the Trump administration. Day 381 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. 75,017,613. That is the number of votes Kamala Harris received in 2024. It is the third highest number of votes any candidate for president has ever received. It is especially notable because Kamala Harris is a black woman who ran a campaign that lasted for just over 3 months, not 3 years. The Supreme Court decision yesterday and its effect on the Voting Rights Act lands a certain way for a mindful, optimistic, and hopeful guy like me. It is the ripping off of the Band-Aid on a temporary fix that was put on a much deeper wound that represents this country's founding sins that have never been properly atoned for. The reality that has been imposed upon us now says, hey, this was a temporary fix, and we know it was a temporary fix because it's over now. This temporary fix has been taken away, and that is the indicator for us to say in response, now, as a nation, we must atone for these sins properly and in total. One way I know how to atone for the sins is for Indigenous and Black women to run this country. We got pretty fucking close in the last election. The effect of the civil rights that were granted to Kamala Harris to vote for herself in 1965 have now been undermined for a woman who only received 1.5% fewer votes than the guy who didn't even manage to get 50%. This feels like, hey, there isn't even the perception of a safety net anymore. Now you have to figure out how to fight fire with fire and take what should be rightfully yours. Now we force the start of the pendulum swing towards accountability and justice after its long swing to the right that began here 250 years ago. Let's go. In the meantime, I want to make it very clear that I do not have the intellect of a historian or a civil rights lawyer or a New York Times culture columnist. What I do have is hypersensitive observational skills. And when I'm out here in the streets in my very mixed community, people are good to one another at almost every turn. Believe me, I am listening. I'm Jewish and gay, but I'm still white. So I can pass in a chaotic civilization, but I will not let my belief in progress be shaken while I ignore the Trump administration. Day 382 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. This means something. I have learned over these past 10 years of the ascent of the leader of the Trump administration that we live amongst a lot of dum-dums, which is a reality I admittedly wasn't completely aware of before. I just figured some people had not fulfilled their intellectual potential yet. In fact, I still believe that many people who seem like dum-dums just lack self-awareness, and self-awareness is a skill that can be developed if one wishes to. No matter how much I am tempted to believe that we are incredibly polarized, I have to look at the facts on the street, and the facts on the street are these. I live in a very mixed area. Every race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, political affiliation, religion, and what have you. With all of that, in the past 10 years, I have seen exactly 3 MAGA hats and maybe half a dozen Donald bumper stickers. And if I'm being honest, the 3 people that I saw wearing those hats fit the stereotype. They all looked crazy, and not in a don't mess with me crazy way, but in a I have already been messed with crazy way. So, even in those cases, it wasn't like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind constructing Devil's Tower out of mashed potatoes. This didn't mean something. If you haven't seen the film, do yourself a favor and do so. But to get to the point, I continue to have love for everyone who I cross paths with in this teeny tiny world, even if they prove themselves to be completely brain rotted, because even brain rotted people deserve love and an opportunity to love. And my hope is that they will start with loving themselves, even if they don't yet have the capacity to love me. I don't look at them as adversaries intent on any kind of nefarious social infiltration. I look, I listen, and then I return to ignoring the Trump administration.
Hi, it's Josh. Have you seen those ridiculous red hats in the wild that represent complete subservience to a cult leader? Better to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I am telling you, quite frankly. It's funny, though, the popular opinion of this film has shifted over the years. I have been hearing that the Richard Dreyfuss character has come to be thought of as kind of an asshole, and I can see it now. I mean, spoiler alert, but after putting his family through complete hell, he abandons them to go off into space with aliens. That's pretty bad parenting. Although, when I think about it happening to me, I don't think I personally would have had a problem with my father abandoning us and going off into space with aliens. Maybe next time. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a 5-star rating or review for the 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast in your podcast player, and leave a comment saying you like the show. If you feel like leaving a comment about the leader of the Trump administration that says something like, "When that guy plays with mashed potatoes, he is nuttier than Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters," you go right ahead and do that. Please tell a politically curious friend about the show, and while you are at it, please follow me on all of my social media by going to superjews.com, that's superjews.com, where you will find the links that you are looking for. If you would like to throw some support to me and the show, please subscribe to my Substack. Go to superjews.substack.com and just enter your email address. I would appreciate that immensely. A link is in the show notes. You can also buy me a coffee. For a mere $3, you will earn my undying gratitude, or at least enough gratitude to last until the next time I ask you to buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Josh Bloom. Lastly, my book about psych-pop icons and Elephant Six co-founding band, the Apples in Stereo, is also available now. Choose your preferred bookseller at applesbook.com. We are living in trying times that are trying to take our time away from living. My reason for doing this show is to remain mindful, optimistic, and hopeful so I can reclaim that time, regain my mind, and focus on what is important. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. See you next time. Bye.